Oh, who will rise and who will fall? Mm-hmm. Time will tell it all. Who will rise and who will fall? What up, Shalom, everybody? How y'all doing? Welcome back to the next episode of Reading Shiloh. Reading with Shiloh. I'm Shiloh, baby. What's the business? Shalom, 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 man. What's going on with y'all today? What's the deal? What you can, what you can't, what it is and what it ain't. That's what we trying to figure out. We're back for the next episode, man. This is part one of the new sea of pages. The new sea of pages we're about to adventure on to see. And it's in the same neck of the woods as the last book. It's in the same neck of the woods. Not far. We're trying to read the Black Jacobins. Look at that. I like that. I like the cover. It feels good. Has a certain kind of thing on it. The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, man. The Black Jacobins. It's a continuation or another book that goes in conjunction with the slave revolution in the Caribbean of 1789 to 1804, because I believe this takes place in around the same time frame. Just another book from a different angle, a different perspective, different perception by a different person. And we're going to see what they got to talk about. Ah, man. This is book number 27. We're on book number 27. Eee. Book 27, man. The Black Jacobins, Toussaint Louverture and the Saint Domingo Revolution by C.L.R. James, with a new introduction by David Scott. This powerful and impassioned book has long been hailed as a classic account of the Haitian Revolution of 1791 to 1803, and the largest successful revolt by enslaved peoples in history. The uprising began in the wake of the storming of the Bastille in France, but became the model for liberation movements from Africa to Cuba. It is the story of the French colony of Saint Domingo, a place where the brutality of plantation owners towards enslaved people was horrifyingly severe. And it is the story of a charismatic and barely literate enslaved person named Toussaint Louverture, who successfully led the black people of Saint Domingo against successive invasions successive invasions by overwhelming French, Spanish, and English forces, and in the process helped to form the first independent post-colonial nation in the Caribbean, the Black Jacobins. I don't know if it's pronounced Jacobins. I pronounce it Jacobians. I'm probably wrong because it's not spelled Jacobins. Jacobins, the Black Jacobins, which I find that very what's the word I'm looking for? Not strange. What a coinkydink. The Black Jacobins, or Jacob, from the 12 tribes of Jacob, 12 tribes of Israel. We're going to get into that today. Book number 27. We are starting book number 27. We're going to see if they have any is it anything that we're going to find in this one that parallels the last book? Close this window, shit. Is there any new information that we might find, or is it going to be about the same? I think it's going to be some of the same, which I'm not tripping on, because I like a good revolution. Because we need to have one of our own. We need to have revolutions in our mind. Start with the revolution with yourself. Build and tear down the plantations that's in your mind, and rebuild with what our new Black Wall Street. Rebuild the Black Wall Street in your mind. Tear down the plantation. Build up your own colony in your mind. Build up your own nation in your mind. A new nation, a new thing. new laws, new way of thinking, man. Build it up, but you got to tear the old shit down first. So we're gonna get started on this one, man. When you come in, like, comment, subscribe, share, tell your people SHILO out here reading shit, because that's what we doing, reading stuff, baby. And this time, the Black Jacobins, But before we get into reading, we're gonna go ahead and get our routine going. We're gonna work our body, work our mind, and work our body. That's the deal, man. I need some paper towels. I feel like I'll be sneezing. I've been sneezing all night. I need a towel. I'm going to go get one. So give me. Man, it's been raining down here, and I think that rain and kicked up something and got my allergies jumping. But I'm going to do, when I get back, I'm going to do 25 things. That's what I ask you. Let me go get something to wipe my nose, man. I'll be right back. For an interview. And I wonder what kind of songs they were singing out there. What kind of, I don't want to call them old Negro songs or whatever. All right, let's get this shit started. Oh, ready to read. I've been gone a couple of days fishing. I should have been hunting, but hunting season about over tomorrow. Hunting season is over tomorrow. At least for me. No more bow hunting, unless I'm bow fishing. Let's get this shit started. With the Black Jacobins. Jacobins. I wonder how they pronounce it. Let me see if it's in the Terminator. Maybe the Terminator got it. Jacobins. Jacobins. The Jacobins. The Black Jacobins. That shit sound crazy. The Jacobins. But we're going to see what the Jacobins did. What did they do? What was so special about the Jacobins? I know they did their part, though, but what was so special about them? Let's see. 25 things, though. Give me 25 things, whatever it is. I just felt like I needed something. Fuck it, I'm going to do some push-ups. Fuck it. Let's get some push-ups done out of the way. We can do that quick, fast, in a hurry. 25 of them things. Let's go so we can read about Toussaint Louverture in this book, in the Jacobins. 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 2, 3, 4, 25 of them things. 25. Man, I had a dream last night, man. I was fighting this big ass nigga, man. Big, burly, strong nigga. I whipped him, but in my dream, it's like I ain't have no strength. I was doing something, I had that ball. He was a big old nigga too, man. Big old nigga. Big, cock strong, muscular nigga. Brother. And I got that ball, and I had that ball, and he tried to grab me, and hit that ball like that, and I just couldn't squeeze it tight enough. Then he got loose, and I got him with an ankle lock, and I just couldn't turn it. I couldn't turn that thing. Like, I felt like I had no power. I beat him, but I felt like I had no power. And then they got up and talking about, man, they need me on the team. I need to go ahead and, like, SHILO, man, yeah, you coming out, man. You need to go put on the pads, and you coming out there, baby. Like, I've been trying to do that. I ain't tripping. Anyway, let's read about the Black Jacobins. Toussaint Louverture and the San Domingo Revolution by C.L.R. James. Book number 27. Book number 27. It's a pretty decent sized book, I guess. I don't know what's decent size. 400 and shit. 417 pages. 418 pages. There's going to be 418 pages. Ooh. Seems daunting. But we've been moving through the other books pretty good. We've been moving through the other books pretty good. I've been rowing well. So hopefully we can move through this one just as good. Let's go. Let's start this sea of pages. The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. The sea of pages that has been laid to us, and we're going to see what treasures we can find. What can we learn and grow from? If we have all that we need to succeed, we're just going to add to it. We're going to add to it, man, and be better. Better. That's the plan. C.L.R. James, The Black Jacobins. Book number 27. This is part 1. C.L.R. James, from 1901 to 1989, was a Trinidadian-born historian, literary critic, and philosopher, and a leader of the Pan-African movement. Prodigious and electric intellectual, he debated Marcus Garvey in England. Ooh, I wonder if some of that's going to be in here. Or do I have to go find the Pan-African book to see if he debated, see about the debate. Confronted Trotsky in Mexico and influenced leaders of African revolutions, including Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. I know I'm pronouncing the last part wrong. He is perhaps best remembered for his 1938 masterwork, The Black Jacobins, which we're about to read. The first major analysis of the Haitian Revolution in the context of the French Revolution. In addition to his many works of history and his political activism, he was known as well for occasional playwriting and fiction. His novel, Minty Alley, written in 1927, was the first by a Black West Indian to be published in Britain. And James was also known as an avid sportsman. He was the cricket writer for the Manchester Guardian beginning in the 1930s, and his 1963 book, Beyond the Boundary, which he described as neither cricket reminiscence nor autobiography, has been hailed as the best single book on cricket ever written. Mr. C.L.R. James, the Trinidadian historian, Trinidadian-born historian. Books by C.L.R. James, if anybody wants to find it. The Letters from London, Minty Alley, Toussaint Louverture, the story of the only successful slave revolt in history, a play in 3 acts. World Revolution, 1917 to 1936, the rise and fall of the Communist International, a history of Pan-African revolt, the Black Jacobins, and Beyond the Boundary. It gives you a little map in the beginning of it. Vintage book edition, 1963. This book was copywritten in 1963. And how much is it still the same today? That's another question. How much of it is still the same? So I guess while Toussaint, where is San Domingo? Or is it Santo Domingo? This is the map it gives on the front. Haiti, Saint Domingo. And this is a closer picture of Haiti, closer map of Haiti. We're looking at about 13 chapters, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, we're looking at 13 chapters plus the bibliography and the appendix from Toussaint Louverture to Fidel Castro. We're going to read them. We're definitely going to read those. You have the preface to the first edition and the preface to the vintage edition and the introduction, the radical novelty of Toussaint Louverture by David Scott. That came out in 2023. The first preface came out in 1938. The second preface came out in 1962. And then the new introduction in 2023 by David Scott. So we're probably going to read that, all those three, and the prologue this morning. We're not even going to get into chapter 1 yet, most likely. We're going to see. We're going to see how long it takes us to read those. We're going to do about an hour. We're going to try to keep it at about an hour. Yeah, we got to read that much before we even get to chapter 1. Let's go. Let's go. Let's seek and find. What is there to enlighten our mind? What treasures can we expose? What have they hidden in the book from us? Let's go. Preface to the first edition, 1938. In 1789, the French West Indian colony of San Domingo supplied 2/3 of the overseas trade of France and was the greatest individual market for the European slave trade. It was an integral part of the economic life of the age and the greatest colony in the world, the pride of France and the envy of every other imperialist nation. The whole structure rested on the labor of 500,000 slaves. And in August of 1791, after 2 years of the French Revolution and its persecutions in San Domingo, the slaves revolted. The struggle lasted for 12 years, and the slaves defeated in turn the local whites and the soldiers of the French monarchy, a Spanish invasion, a British expedition of some 60,000 men, and a French expedition of similar size under Bonaparte's brother-in-law. The defeat of Bonaparte's expedition in 1803 resulted in the establishment of the Negro state of Haiti, which has lasted to this day. And the revolt is the only successful slave revolt in history, and the odds it had to overcome is evidence of the magnitude of the interests that were involved. The transformation of slaves, trembling in hundreds before a single white man, into a people able to organize themselves and defeat the most powerful European nations of their day, is one of the great epics of revolutionary struggle and achievement. Why and how this happened is the theme of this book. By a phenomenon often observed, the individual leadership responsible for this unique achievement was almost entirely the work of a single man, Toussaint Louverture. Now, Beauchamp, in the Biographie Universelle, calls Toussaint Louverture one of the most remarkable men of the period, rich in remarkable men. He dominated from his entry until circumstances removed him from the scene. And the history of the San Domingo Revolution will therefore largely be a record of his achievements and his political personality. The writer believes and is confident that narrative will prove that between 1789 and 1815, with the single exception of Bonaparte himself, no single figure appeared on the historical stage more greatly gifted than this Negro, a slave till he was 45. Yet Toussaint did not make the revolution. It was the revolution that made Toussaint. And even that is not the whole truth. Nope. Shalom, shalom. Whether it was faked or not, we're going to read what C.L.R. James has to say. Whether it was faked or not, it's definitely a book about the revolution concerning them. The writing of history becomes even more difficult, and the power of God or the weakness of man, Christianity, or the divine right of the kings to govern wrong can easily be made responsible for the downfall of states and the birth of new societies. Such elementary conceptions lend themselves willingly to narrative treatment, and from Tacitus to, Macaulay, Tacitus to Macaulay, M-A-C-A-U-L-A-Y, Macaulay. Let's write it down and let's look it up. Appreciate the comment, though. Thank you for the comments, good or bad, righteous or bullshit. Thank you for the comments. All comments help. M-A-C-A-U-L-A-Y, Macaulay. Let's go straight to the Terminator. M-A-C-A-U-L-A-Y, Macaulay, and we're going to see the pronunciation and definition. Macaulay. It's pronounced Macaulay. The name Macaulay has multiple meanings, including a Scottish surname, a first name, and an economic term. Let's see what the economic term. The Macaulay duration is an economic statistic that represents the weighted average number of years an investor holds a bond until the bond's cash flow equals the amount paid for the bond. It can also be viewed as an economic balance point of a group of cash flows. Macaulayan or Macaulayan is an adjective that means related to or resembling the English writer Macaulay. We'll stick with the economic term and leave it there. From Thucydides to Green, the traditional famous historians have been more artists than scientists. They wrote so well because they saw so little. And today, by a natural reaction, we tend to a personification of the social forces, great men being merely and nearly instruments in the hands of economic destiny. As so often, the truth does not lie in between. Great men make history, but only such history as it is possible for them to make. And their freedom of achievement is limited by the necessities of their environment. And to portray the limits of those necessities and the realization, complete or partial, of all possibilities, that is the true business of the historian. In a revolution, when the ceaseless slow acclimation of centuries burst into volcanic eruptions, the meteoric flares and flights above are the meaningless chaos and lend themselves to infinite caprice and romanticism unless the observer sees them always as projections of the subsoil from which they came. The writer has sought not only to analyze, but to demonstrate in their movement the economic forces of the age, their molding of society and politics, of men in the mass and individual men, the powerful reaction of these on their environment at one of those rare moments when society is at a boiling point and therefore fluid. The analysis is a science of and the demonstration of the art which is history. The violent conflicts of our age enable our practiced vision to see into the very bones of previous revolutions more easily than heretofore. Yet, for that very reason, it is impossible to recollect historical emotions on that tranquility which the great English writer too narrowly associated with poetry alone. Tranquility today is either innate, the Philistine, or to be acquired only by a deliberate doping of a personality. It was in the stillness of the seaside suburb that could be heard most clearly and insistently the booming of the Franco's heavy artillery, the rattle of Stalin's firing squads, and the fierce shrill turmoil of the revolutionary moment striving for clarity and influence. Such is our age, and this book is of it, with something of the fever and the fret. Nor does the writer regret it. The book is the history of a revolution, and written under different circumstances, it would have been a different, but not necessarily a better book. C.L.R. James. C.L.R. James. Preface to the Vintage Edition, 1962. This book was written in 1938, and today I have little to add to or subtract from the fundamental ideas which govern its conception. There are far more common property now than they were 25 years ago, and where they fly in the face of historical events, I have omitted or altered them, never more than to the extent of a few lines. I have retained the concluding pages which envisaged and more intended to stimulate the coming emancipation of Africa. They are a part of the history of our time, and in 1938, only the writer and a handful of close associates thought, wrote, and spoke as if the African events of the last quarter of the century were imminent. The appendix, from Toussaint Louverture to Fidel Castro, attempts for the future of the West Indies, all of them what was done for Africa in 1938. Writers on the West Indies always relate them to their approximation to Britain, France, Spain, and America, and that is to say, to Western civilization, never in relation to their own history. This is here attempted for the first time. January 4th, 1962, C.L.R. James. Introduction, The Radical Novelty of Toussaint Louverture, 2023. C.L.R. James and the Black Jacobins was the first published in London in the summer of 1938 by Secker and Warburg. Later that year, it would appear for the Dial in New York. And James, B 1901 in parentheses, had moved from, colonial Trinidad to metropolitan Britain only 6 years before, and in March 1932. Initially, a self-consciously literary man oriented vaguely toward Bloomsbury modernist realism, and with no more than an insipid sense of anti-colonial, let alone socialist, politics. Within these 6 years, he had more or less abandoned his commitment to writing fiction and established himself at the center of both the Marxist debate about the Soviet Union and the prospect of a new international left, and the anti-colonial debate about national and Black self-determination. These would form interlocking axes, shaping the analytical and political framework of the Black Jacobins. Specifically, the anti-colonial question in the British West Indies was centrally a question about the rise and fall of social and economic effects of plantation slavery. And in 1933 to 34, shortly after James' arrival in Britain, there were centennial celebrations of the passages of the Parliamentary Act abolishing slavery throughout the British Empire. The act received royal assent on 28 August 1838 and took effect on August 1st of 1834, and in particular of the role of William Wilberforce and his humanitarian allies in overcoming and the prevailing West Indies slave interests. Therefore, the widely accepted story of the slavery abolition in British historiography was motivated and animated by the idea, one may as well say the racist conceit, that abolition was largely a benevolent act of English charity toward a benighted people, good for little more than service and brute labor. It was a story, therefore, that included or disavowed both the fact of the unjust enrichment of Britons and British society out of the plunder and violation of Black people for more than 200 years, and the fact that the enslaved were not mere passively grateful objects of the rule and abjectly accommodating themselves to their condition, but actively involved in their own emancipation. In the Black Jacobins, James addresses himself to both these strands of racial prejudice in British historiography, but between them, his principal focus is the latter, namely, the role of the enslaved in liberating themselves from their bondage, and clearly the most dramatic historical instance of the self-emancipating of the enslaved was the Saint Dominic insurrection that led the Haitian Revolution. For James and the Black Jacobins, or Jacobins, the story of the Haitian Revolution, told as a revolutionary account of the revolutionary history learned in part from Jules Michelet's History of the French Revolution and Leon Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution, is the story of the Black anti-colonial self-determination embodied in the vindicating singularity of Toussaint Louverture. Above all, it is Toussaint that fascinates James almost to the point, perhaps, of identification. And indeed, James was already thinking about Toussaint and what he represented as the heroic Black figure before he left Trinidad from Britain. I guess Toussaint was like Superman that day. Toussaint was like a real Superman. A Superman, or maybe even a Santa Claus, or definitely a Malcolm X type character, by any means necessary type man. Above all, it is Toussaint that fascinates James almost to the point, perhaps, of identification. And indeed, James was already thinking about Toussaint and what he represented as an heroic Black figure before he left Trinidad for Britain. And throughout the Black Jacobins, he struggles with how best to render his protagonist satisfactorily as a distinctive historical actor. The circumstances of his conditions as a relatively privileged enslaved man, James apparently did not know that Toussaint was already a free and slave-owning black at the time of the insurrection. The noteworthy qualities of his personality, the ideas and force that moved him, and so on. For James, the ideas and forces that moved him, and so on, for James, Toussaint is exceptional, unprecedented, and novel. He is not only a Caribbean Creole and therefore neither African nor European. He is entirely modern, a subjugated product of the shaping social and economic technologies of the proto-factory sugar plantation. But this is not all. Toussaint is not only modern in the sense all of the enslaved were obliged to be or become modern, he is the embodiment of that quintessentially modern subject, the intellectual. The intellectual is not merely someone who thinks creatively, but someone whose very form of life is mediated and activated through the temporal fold of reflexive being. In this respect, for James, Toussaint is wholly unlike most of his black contemporaries, and unlike Mackinland, an earlier rebel leader, for example, and unlike Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint's general and successor, which we definitely read about in the slave revolution in the Caribbean. Hey, shalom, shalom. Shalom, Marcus Banks, shalom. Both men, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Toussaint's general and successor, both men of remarkable intelligence, courage, and will, but not intellectuals. And part of what intrigues James about this quality is that it is at once a gift and a curse. It is what enables Toussaint to see, in a visionary way, what others around him cannot see. And it is also what, from the certain point of his career of leadership, blinds him to what lies under his nose and clouds the clarity of decisiveness of his actions. Across the arc of the Black Jacobins, James endlessly troubles over the form of life of an intellectual and political leader who is struggling to do what has never been done before. In its central dimension of Toussaint's singularity, of the sheer novelty of the subjectivity, and his undertaking that he did not know what certainty where he was going or how he would get there. This is crucial to James' point about Toussaint. He could not have known. He had no blueprint to guide him, and so he could not have foreseen what the horizon or end game of the insurrection he was leading should be. He could not know, for example, as those after him would claim to know, that he should have been heading towards nation-state sovereignty all along. We who read the Black Jacobins in our time with a ready-made anti-colonialism that Toussaint could not have had, and follow him, sometimes with frustration, as he stumbles around, stumbles around his given world without a map. There we go. Trying to find his way. He knows that his is a fight for freedom from slavery, but even with so, to us, elementary, a project he has to work out without, through experience and reflection, the idea that the relevant freedom cannot be for himself and a few select officers alone, but must be for all the enslaved. Nor is it transparently clear that he should become governor of the colony territory or the colonial territory. Shit. Shalom, Marcus. My bad. I wasn't paying attention. I was caught up in rolling, baby. I am reading the Black Jacobins, or the Black Jacobins. The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. This is to go in conjunction with the slave revolution in the Caribbean, 1789 to 1804. It's to go into conjunction or to run parallel with it. And right now, I'm only in the first part of the book. I'm in the introduction. I'm in the prologues. Matter of fact, the prologues or excuse me, the preface. I read the prefaces, and I'm in. Yeah, I'm in the introduction. We're in the introduction. I lost my place. There we go. Nor is it transparently clear that he should become governor of the colonial territory, let alone its sovereign. This idea of the independence is a hard-earned notion of political order that Toussaint educated and well-traveled contemporaries in the newly minted United States are only then beginning to work out. And how and by what process he comes to the conclusions he arrives at are questions that intrigue James. For sure, for sure. I found it very peculiar that it's called the Jacobins or the Black Jacobins. I found it very peculiar of that. What a coincidence. Again, in trying to work out the mode of labor that should accompany liberation from slavery, Toussaint argues or angers some of his most trusted comrades, his nephew, Moise among them, when he turns enslaved to the plantation. I was enraged at that as well. And to add insult to injury, sometimes even to their former enslavers. I was mad at that as well. But for James, this is not surely because Toussaint is cynically indifferent to the brutality of plantation labor and ignorant of what it symbolizes to the enslaved, but rather because he can dimly, shoutily, what is that word? INCHOATELY. Inchotely. Inchotely. Let's go straight to the terminator. INCHOATELY. Let's go to inchoate first. Inchoately. Inchoate, what does it mean? Inchoately. See, I don't understand, man. A lot of times I don't understand. When does the CH sound like a K? And when does it sound like a Ch? You know. What is the meaning of inchoate? Inchoate means just beginning to form. All right, let's see. Inchoately, recognize, just beginning to form, recognize inchoately. Inchoate means just beginning to form. You can have an inchoate idea, like the earliest flickers of images for your masterpiece, or an inchoate feeling, like your inchoate sense of annoyance towards your sister's new talking parrot. Inchoate comes from the Latin word for beginning. Inchoate. Inchoately. You're just beginning to recognize that Saint Domingo is integrated into a wider system. Inchoately recognize that Saint Domingo is in, it makes sense. Inchoate, INCHOATEL, well, inchoately. I looked up inchoate. Inchoately, INCHOATELY, inchoate, or inchoately, excuse me. But it comes from the word inchoate, which derives from the Latin word. It don't say what the Latin word is. means just beginning to form. So, but rather because he can dimly, inchoately recognize, or just beginning to recognize, inchoately recognize that Saint Dominique is integrated into a wider system, and he thus believes that the sugar plantation is a necessary part of the survival of his fledgling state. In the post-colonial world, this belief is now a familiar one. And after all, from the vantage point of decolonization, it is easy to see that delinking from colonial capitalism might have been at least as catastrophic as Toussaint, as neo-colonial political leaders have imagined or feared. And in the contemporary Caribbean, I think that's why even here in America, they wasn't trying to really let go of the slaves. And when they did abolish slavery, you are still, it was sharecropping. And sharecropping, in my mind, is the same thing as what Toussaint did. Toussaint had the people go back and work for the same plantations that you were on, work for the same slave owners that you had. Which is pretty much what sharecropping did as well. Inchoate. Inchoate. Similarly, James was well aware that he would have to meet the question of Toussaint's supposed enchantment with Europe. Was Toussaint merely a supine Europhile, a mimic man? Was Europe simply the hegemonic condition of his formation as a man and an intellectual and a political leader? Or was it also, and more deeply, the motivating impetus of his moral aspirations? Given the formation of the Caribbean, the destruction of the native population, and the fragmenting cultural processes involved in enslavement of Africans, these were unavoidable questions, and they would have had a special resonance for James as a Caribbean colonial intellectual and a political activist himself, grappling with the presence of Europe in his own orientations, attitudes, desires, and so on, and searching for the idiom in which to express his own distinctive individuality. Undoubtedly, for James, Toussaint was not merely superficially formed by European colonization as a normative structure of dominant language, ideas, values, technologies, and exceptions. He was also a man of the radical Enlightenment. This is the point of his seeming acquaintance with the Abbé Raynal's famous book of the philosophical and political history of the settlements and trade of the Europeans in the East and West Indies. And therefore, as James put it, revolutionary France constituted more than the framework of his mind. It was the fertile ground for the new mode of social existence, and based on the idea of natural liberty that was now justifiably open to him. And yet, notably, James is also careful to say that while Toussaint held European civilization in the highest esteem, he was, not seduced by it and conferred upon it no moral superiority. He remained undeceived by the criminality and duplicity and racism of European imperialism, which still is today. Part 2 of the introduction. Let's see how far we're going to go, man. We almost at the hour now. I'm going to just go ahead and try to finish it out. I'm going to try to finish out the introduction, and we'll stop there. We'll stop after I finish the introduction, about 3 more pages. 3 more pages. 2.5. Throughout his life, part two of the introduction. Throughout his life, James kept returning to the Black Jacobins in a revolutionary attitude, as though he thought generating new questions for him, especially new questions about Toussaint Louverture. And in the preface to the first edition, James had located the writing he had carried out in the context of the certain world historical circumstances, Stalin's purges and the Spanish Civil War. I wonder if that's where they get the purge from Stalin. I wonder. The emergence of the international left around Trotsky and indicated that had it been written under other circumstances, it would have been different. It would have been a different, if not a better book. And for James, then circumstances mattered. When in the early 1960s he returned to the text, the context was substantially different from the one in which he had originally written it in the 1930s. And in particular, there was a new dawn of African and Caribbean independence with its hopes and disappointments. And there was the Cuban Revolution, offering an example of political sovereignty more radical than any prevailing in the Caribbean. The second and revised edition of the Black Jacobins, or Jacobins, was published in New York by Vintage in 1963, and it brought the text to the attention of the whole new generation of readers ready for the story of the revolutionary change in the Caribbean. In the new edition, James introduced two principal revisions that, in some respects, gave the book a slightly different feel than the original edition. The first of these revisions consists of the 6 dense paragraphs added to the beginning of the to the beginning of the final chapter, the War of Independence, the great climax to the story of slave revolution. These paragraphs explicitly introduce the theme of the tragic in understanding the rise and fall of Toussaint Louverture. James had been thinking systematically about tragedy as a principle of historical poetics since the 1950s, and especially in the context of the work that informed Mariners, Renegades, and Castaways, published in 1953. Why did Toussaint make the errors that, from a certain point in his leadership, drove him inexorably towards disaster, and characteristically refusing the psychological description of Toussaint as a divided personality? The idea of the tragic gave James a way of situating Toussaint's dilemma in terms of an actor at the historical crossroads, caught in a paradoxical moment of incommensurable alternatives between which it was nevertheless necessary to decide either a return to slavery as he knew Napoleon was planning on the one hand, or a Saint Dominic without France on the other. And given who he was, the former slave and a man of the Enlightenment, neither was possible for him to imagine. And so, from being a leader of decisive action, Toussaint became the paralyzed embodiment of the facilitation that was eventually the ruin to him. Insisting, as always, on Toussaint's human complexity and integrity, James urges us to see in him a man with unblemished intentions, derailed neither by cowardice nor complicity, but by circumstances that were at once constitutive of his predicament and beyond his personal control. The second major revision in the 1963 edition consists of the inclusion of the now famous appendix, and from Toussaint Louverture's to Fidel Castro. What connects Toussaint Louverture and Fidel Castro, memorably argued, is not the obvious fact that they were leaders of successful revolutions. Rather, what links them is that they are exemplars of the Caribbean sensibility, and the process that they set in motion were derived from the distinctively Caribbean historical predicament, perhaps even a distinctive Caribbean civilization. And the history of the Caribbean, James said, was governed by two principal factors: the sugarcane plantation and Black slavery. And these together had imposed a process of social structure and a pattern of social identity across the Caribbean that differentiated it from Europe and Africa, as well as continental America. And in one of the most insightful passages of the appendix, James says that the sugar plantation was simultaneously a demoralizing and civilizing institution. It introduced powers that both destroyed old moral and cultural forms of life and consecrated the enslaved into a new and entirely modern social existence. By these, James means to point to the modern proto-factory character in the plantation as a labor regime, and to its insertion into the modernizing capitalist world system. Consequently, from the outset, as James put it, the enslaved lived an essentially and inescapably modern life. Yeah, some of these words is getting me right now. Less than a decade later, in 1971, James returned once more to the text of the Black Jacobins in another revisionary attitude, and once again, with implications for our understanding of Toussaint Louverture. The occasion was a series of lectures at the Institute of the Black World, Atlanta, a remarkable institution that between 1969 and 1983 served as a forum of radical Black discussions, not least between Caribbean and American intellectuals. And James gave 3 lectures: How I Wrote the Black Jacobins and the Reconstruction, and a comparative analysis of how I would rewrite the Black Jacobins. Each of the lectures is a tour de force of originality, erudition, and lucidity. Not least, James deeply appreciative of reflections on W.E.B. Du Bois' 1935 account of post-slavery America, and perhaps, though of most significance, here is the third of his lectures, James' recollection on what he might do differently were he to be writing the book then, in the early 1970s. And again, the context matters. And this was the era of Black power in the United States, and there was a deeper sense, certainly keener than was the case in the 1930s or even in the early 1960s, that Black history should be written not from the perspective of the elites, but from the point of the view of the folk, of the ordinary and larger unremembered men and women who make history from below. And James, who had been teaching at Federal City College in Washington, D.C. as a visiting professor, was clearly attuned to this critique of his historiographical mode of heroic agency. And in his lecture, he tells his audience that were he writing the Black Jacobins then, he would not write it from the perspective of Toussaint and the other well-known leaders, but from that of the nameless slave rebels who actually made the revolution what it was. Writing history for James was an endless recursive process of revision, of textualization, there we go, of asking again and again what the present circumstances enabled him to see or urge him to emphasize of the past he was recounting. Part three, we're almost there. Part 3, the introduction. The Black Jacobins is undoubtedly a classic of historical literature. But what makes it so? And why should we think of it as a classic, and not only of Caribbean history specifically, or Black history, but rather of world history? A classic, evidently is a book one feels compelled to return to again and again, a book read by generation after generation, and not because it offers us invaluable information or irrefutable facts, but because it tells a story that reflects back to us recognizable dimensions of a human spirit struggling against vicious odds to affirm, enhance, and expand the given boundaries of our common humanity. This is what the Black Jacobins offers us as in the luminous, unforgettable narrative whose attentive rhythms and dramatic contours point towards the sustaining exigencies, there we go. It's sustaining exigencies of a common human value. Pivotal to the sense of the Black Jacobins as an irrepressible classic, and I believe is precisely its evocation of the radical novelty and radical universality of Toussaint Louverture. As James says of him in the closing poignant sentence of the 1963 appendix, Toussaint was the first and greatest of the West Indies. By this, he means that Toussaint was literally unprecedented, unparalleled, and not simple in the sense that he had no equal, but in the strict sense that he was originally singular, a hitherto inconceivable form of human life. And as everyone who reads the book will immediately recognize, James Toussaint was not simply an ordinary figure of remote and provincial local knowledge. He was a larger-than-life figure of the heroic world historical universality. There we go. Universality. He was a man who, while completely shaped by the constraining particularities of his degraded, enslaved circumstances, was nevertheless not reducible to them, and his life and his project have a meaning. In other words, that transcends the specific framework of his time and place, or rather in Toussaint, that specificity of time and place are lived in a dimension of universality, and his vision not given to him all at once, but emerging stage by stage through a gradual assimilation and transformation of the experience of the white supremacist. Normativity of the slave empire forged an inaugural idea of human freedom, and namely a freedom born of slave emancipation. In striving to define and redefine the terms of this emancipation, it is true of his example has already been received, even by his mortal enemies, and that seeming failure is itself paradoxically the exemplary mark of his tragic humanity. This is what James so unwaveringly admires in his hero, even when he disappoints him, and the audacity that with which, to the very end, he claims his moral and political right to the self-determination violently denied him and his fellow liberators, and his willingness to sacrifice what Abraham Lincoln famously called the last full measure of devotion in the vindication of that claim, and that for giving us this vivid picture of one of the exemplifications of the virtue and excellence, we remain indebted to C.L.R. James, including refashioning futures, criticism after coloniality, there we go, post-coloniality, conscripts of modernity, conscripts of modernity, and the tragic of colonial enlightenment. Stuart Hall's voice, intimations of the ethics of receptive generosity, and irreparable evil, an essay in moral and reparative history. He is currently at work on a biography of Stuart Hall, Scott is the founder and editor of the journal Small Acts, and director of the Small Acts Project, which I think if anybody hasn't watched it, I think it's on Prime. Amazon Prime has Small Acts. My stomach is growling. We're going to stop there. We're going to stop there at Black Jacobins, the beginning of the prologue. And then we'll get to chapter 1. We'll finally get into chapter 1. So far, so good. So far, so good. That has been the sea of pages that has been laid to us by Mr. C.L.R. James, the Black Jacobins, Toussaint Louverture and the San Domingo Revolution. We're going to keep rolling. We have all that we need to succeed. They had all that they needed to succeed, and they succeeded. They succeeded where many have failed and where nobody had succeeded before them. In the uprising, the revolution, the revolt against their slave masters, led by Toussaint Louverture, which did some things I didn't agree with, but in the end all, he relieved them. He emancipated them. He had slavery abolished because of the fighting, some of the fighting and tactics they were using and things that they were doing in what is now Haiti, and even returned it back to its original name, the name that the so-called indigenous people of that land had called it, Haiti. Man. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Man, oh man. So far, so good. I stumbled. I was stumbling over a couple of words. More than a couple, I stumbled. But we pushed through. We'll come back next time and keep going and keep rowing. Keep rowing through the sea of pages and see what else can we expose. What treasures can we expose, man? What can we learn and grow from? What can we take from the book and apply to a life that can help us to be better? What way of thinking can we, assimilate? What way of thinking can we assimilate? Can we assimilate a revolutionary mindset? Can we assimilate that? That is a good question. Can we do so? Do you even want to? Or are you happy? Wee sick boss, is you one of them? Is you a wee sick boss person, or are you like, I'm not gonna take this shit no more person? And if you're not, then it's some things you have to do with your life. It's some adjustments that you have to make. And sometimes you might have to start off small. You have to start off small and work your way up to big. And that's what I'm trying to do. Start off small. That's why I ask of you 25 things like I'm about to ask now. We worked our body, we worked our mind, and let's work our body one last time. Work our mind one last time. I'm gonna work our body one last time. I feel like Denzel in Training Day. I mean, not Training Day, the Book of Eli. Got that cat all. My lips was dry. My lips was dry the whole time. Anyway, give me 25 things. 25 things, man. What you gonna do? Do something. 25 of them. 25 of them. Let's work our body, man. Let's work our body. 25 of them. I'm gonna hand people something. Because you got to start somewhere. Some of us is too big, Some of us not gonna make it. Some of us not gonna make it. Some of us too big to make it. When man. We need to revolutionize our guts along with our minds. We need to revolutionize our bodies, My bad, it felt like I was gonna sneeze. We need to revolutionize ourselves, It starts with us. Not everybody gonna want to do that. Some people gonna want to stay slaves. Some people gonna want to be in the in the dumb state of mind and have, what is that? What is it? Ignorance is bliss. Some people want to stay ignorant. Some people want to stay ignorant. They want to be where they're at because they're blissful. You know, like they don't think certain things affect them. I would rather have, you know, even though it was there was a fight by Toussaint, I would rather have my own nation. I would rather have my own nation instead of being subservient to somebody else. But anyway, let's go. 25 things, man. 25 things. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that's better. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. Get 25 on the other arm too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, one more. 25 in that thing. Ooh. Gotta start off small sometime, man. Small insertions or small insurrections led to big revolutions. And we can do it. We can do it. You can make the changes. You can do it. Get it done. That's what we gotta do. Get it done, man. So appreciate everybody that stopped by. I appreciate all the comments in the chat. For those who catch it on the back end, man, like, comment, subscribe, share, tell your people, man, SHILO out here reading shit. We learning shit. We exposing shit. We're changing shit. Revolutionizing shit. Let's handle it. And I'm going to do my part of the revolution and read. Since they hate us for reading, since they think it's such a big deal, since they think the world is going to end by reading, hey, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it and become SHILO. Destroyer of worlds. Until next time, man, this has been part one of the book. Once again, The Black Jacobins. The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James. Catch me on the next go around. I'll try to get up early tomorrow. A lot earlier. I'll be up, man. I'll be up looking at the darkness. And we'll finish off the prologue. Tomorrow we'll finish the prologue and start chapter 1. We'll start chapter 1. Chapter 1 has about 26 pages. I don't think I'm going to finish chapter 1, but we'll see. We shall see how it goes. Anyway, man, one book at a time, one session at a time, one episode at a time, until we find the treasures that are hid from us, until we row and persevere. Man, keep pushing, everybody. I hope y'all have a wonderful day today. Shalom, everybody. I'm out here. SHILO. I'm out.